Thanks, Deputy Speaker. This motion is a disgrace. It contains assertions that are simply not true. It implies that Australian workers held up vital medical supplies to sick Australians, particularly cancer patients, when this simply did not occur. It criticises hard-working Australian maritime workers and belittles them for the work that they do, and I say that it's not on. And many of those workers who this motion criticises, Speaker, live in the community that I represent. They're hard-working, community-minded people, and I'm here to defend them from this outrageous and untruthful attack on their character and their work. Now, this motion condemns maritime workers for their actions during a pay dispute that occurred with Patrick's in September. The motion's inaccurate, it's misleading, and it's simply not true, and I'll explain why this is so. Now, when the dispute between Patrick's and the MUA hit the news in September, I telephoned the MUA delegate to verify the media reports, and he explained the truth regarding the dispute. So I want to go through some of the claims that are made in the motion. The first one made by the member for Mackellar is that they were seeking a pay rise of 30% for people on $300,000. Again, the MUA delegate explained that the bargaining claim was for 6%. It was settled for 1.5%. Now, I know the member for Mackellar has a great difficulty in counting, but even a child will know that there's a big difference between 30% and 1.5%, Deputy Speaker. And the claim that these workers are on $300,000 a year, when I put that to one of the wharfies, he said to me, and I quote, "Do you think if we earned $300,000 a year, we'd be out on strike?" And that, I think, explains it all, Deputy Speaker, because it's simply not true. Now, the other claim that was made by the Prime Minister during this dispute was that the maritime workers were holding up ships from unloading materials during a recession. And the PM's quote, what the Prime Minister said at that time is, and I quote, listen to this, "There are 40 of them out there. You can go down to Port Botany or Kurnell and you can see them all lined up, every single one of them, lining up and being held back from Australians getting what they need in the middle of a recession," end quote. That's what the Prime Minister said. So I asked again the MUA workers that work on the docks if any of the ships were being held up. None of those vessels were held up. And if you don't believe me, Deputy Speaker, then I thought, let's consult the company. Let's consult the company. So I went to the Patrick's website, which very handily you can look at and you can see where a particular vessel is. And that's what it looks like. There's the 40 vessels that the Prime Minister claims were offshore at Port Botany and Kurnell.
The member for Kingsford Smith will be not using props.
Okay, now here's one of them. One of them, the Ever Ulysses, off the coast of the Philippines. The coal legit in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and one, Synergy Keelan, to the east of New Zealand. Now, if the Prime Minister thinks that you can stand on the dock at Port Botany and see a ship that's in the middle of the Indian Ocean, then he's got a very powerful set of binoculars, Deputy Speaker. And I could see the Prime Minister standing there at Port Botany saying, "I could see New Zealand from here. I could see New Zealand." What a complete load of rubbish. And this from the Patrick website proves that this is simply untrue. But the most despicable thing about all of this, Deputy Speaker, is that this motion says that vital medicine supplies were being disrupted at a time when they were needed most. Now, those opposite know that that is simply not true. And to say that Australians didn't get medical supplies was simply not true. And I read from a Sydney Morning Herald article on the 30th of September, which says, quote, "The head of Patrick's Terminals has admitted the industrial dispute roiling Australian ports has not led to any containers of medical supplies being held up." The Elizabeth de Somnia, Chief Executive from Medicines Australia, says, quote, "There are no shortages related to this action," end quote. That is the voice of the industry telling the truth about this dispute, yet those opposite want to play on the anxiety of cancer patients, believe it or not, during a pandemic and say that Australian workers are holding up their drugs. It's despicable. It's downright disgraceful, and I'm not going to put up with it on behalf of the workers that I represent. You've got to stop telling lies about Australian workers.
Well, the honourable member's time has expired. The question is the motion.